The Black Hole is one of those movies I always heard a lot of people talk about, but not usually very favorably. And after having finally seen it, I can definitely see why. It's Disney's attempt at trying to be every popular sci-fi film that's ever come out. In fact, you can point practically scene by scene what movie they're trying to replicate. First it's Alien, then it's Battlestar Galactica, then it's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, then it's Star Wars, and then finally it's 2001: A Space Odyssey. In trying to combine them all together, you get a film that has very little identity and is just kind of a huge mess. But at the same time, I can't say it was entirely bad. There's some good things about it. A couple, maybe. It starts off with an expedition in space where they come across a craft that apparently has been lost for years. A scientist and his robot standing on the edge of the black hole. He claims the rest of the crew died, yeah, that's it, and that he's been spending his time trying to figure out how he can go through the black hole and come out the other end. He thinks he's finally found a way and everybody's intrigued to see if he can actually do it. The downside is there's a lot of mysterious things going on. His robot crew almost seems a little too human, and there's just this all-around threatening tone where the people feel more like prisoners than they do guests. Secrets are discovered, sides are declared, and it's a battle to see who can get off the ship alive. The best part about the movie, strangely enough, is its atmosphere. And don't get me wrong, a lot of the effects are not very good. They're supposed to be flying around in space, but it just kind of looks like they're standing around. And the keying is really, really bad. I mean, look at that. Can you take a guess where the real film is and where the matte painting begins? Yeah, it's pretty painful. But it almost makes up for it with this gigantic feeling of dread throughout the first half. Everybody knows something sneaky is going on, but they can't quite put their finger on what it is. They're just waiting for a trigger moment to whip out their guns and start defending themselves, but there never really seems to be a reason to. Plus, it has maybe one of the scariest robots of all time. Maximilian. Yeah, doesn't sound very scary, but whenever he's on screen, all the music stops, all the sound goes dead, and you just feel this thing's presence. He even gets in a few decent kills every once in a while. Look at this scene. Jesus Christ! For Disney, that's pretty gruesome. For such a simple design, I love how uncomfortable I feel whenever he's on screen. He doesn't even say anything, it's just, I don't know, it's just this presence they create. Aside from that, the evil scientist is pretty good, Ernest Borgnine adds a little bit of comedy, but all the other actors are under this really weird stoic way of acting, and it just comes across as so wooden. Even great actors like Roddy McDowall and Anthony Perkins. You can sense they're trying to get a good performance out of this, but there's just so little to work with. There's a lot of elements they throw in that don't really seem to go anywhere either. For example, this woman's telepathic. It's useless. There's totally no point to it at all. She communicates with the robot at some point, but what, they don't have communicators? Walkie-talkies, cell phones, none of that is created in the future? The ending itself is just a huge clusterfuck. It mixes in images of heaven and hell and yeah, I don't know why, I don't know what it's trying to say, but it's not quite like 2001 where the vagueness is part of the intrigue. It's more like we're obviously trying to say something, you just can't figure out what it is. And based on the rest of the film, you can tell that whatever it had to say probably wasn't that intelligent or interesting. Look at this incredibly fake asteroid field is going by and one even crashes into the ship. Why the hell is it going that slowly? They're whizzing by at incredible speeds before and now it's given time for the characters to cross a bridge right in front of it? It's like a school crossing, it just looks ridiculous. But I do give credit to the film that it was at least trying to be a little smarter than your average sci-fi film. Yeah, Star Wars in 2001 were big hits and everybody was trying to copy them, and so is this film. But a lot of it's very dialogue focused. Not much action, not much running around. I guess I kinda like the fact that it at least made an attempt to be smarter. It just didn't seem to pay off. So yeah, I guess like what a lot of people say, it's not a very good film. Even by the so bad it's good standards, it's still not very good. But I am glad I saw a few of those scenes that created some pretty decent atmosphere, even if it was really fake looking. Definitely not one of Disney's best, and you can probably just give it a pass. So a lot of people have been requesting something wicked this way comes, which is interesting because when the film came out, it was a major bomb. It didn't even make half of its money back. And truth be told, I never even heard of it until I was like maybe in the 9th grade. I remember it being shown in my school as an understanding of Ray Bradbury's work, and all the kids were so excited. Something wicked this way comes. Oh, I love that movie. I was kind of wondering how I missed it, as I thought I saw all the really dark 80s kids films that came out around that time. I say this to point out that this is not a film I grew up with, so I'm not really gonna let the nostalgia factor get in the way. But that doesn't necessarily make it a bad film, I just don't think I love it like everybody else loves it. The movie centers around two boys, one named Will Holloway and the other named, get this, Jim Nightshade. God, how does Bradbury find these incredible names? They're often seen around Will's father, who's an old librarian, and they spend most of their time just getting into trouble, all sorts of typical boy stuff. But then one night, a carnival arrives. I mean literally one night. It's all put together in a matter of just a few minutes. And this has been put together by Dr. Dark, played by Jonathan Pryce. He welcomes people to the carnival, but the boys figure out that slowly but surely it seems to be sucking away people's souls, apparently draining their life force and messing with their actual age. Of course, nobody believes the boys' story, so it's up to them to figure out how to stop this evil monster. I get the feeling even if I saw this as a little kid, I wouldn't find it very scary, but it is pretty creative. The atmosphere and characters especially make up for the fact that the story itself is not phenomenally interesting, or at least kinda slow moving. They kind of go through the typical run-of-the-mill stuff of people not believing them, trying to convince those that will believe them, foiling the charismatic, diabolical villain, all that good stuff. It's not a film that screams exciting or super creepy, it's more of a laid-back kind of elegant film. It's hard to explain, it's like the creepy stuff doesn't come out at you and say boo. It's more building up this environment that slowly is trying to get you without you necessarily even knowing it. And at the foreground of that is Jonathan Pryce, who is just perfect as the villain. He never goes quite too over the top, but at the same time, he's just so graceful and loving of what he does. Just look at that outfit, you can tell he wears that suit with such incredible charisma. But at the same time, he's never too charming that he's not scary. A kid can still look at him and know he's the bad guy. I really like Will's father in this too. You just get the feeling he's trying to make ends meet, be a good person, just do what needs to be done. But at the same time, life is starting to wear on him and he just doesn't know what to believe in anymore. This of course is a great contrast for the kids who see all sorts of fantastic things but have a hard time making the adult of the world realize it. A part of me does wish it would go a little further with its creepy imagery and disturbing thoughts. Why not get a few more monsters or go a little bit edgier? I think that's why people still talk about films like Return to Oz and Sleepy Hollow and so forth, because they did take risks. And while this one certainly has a lot of atmosphere, it doesn't really try anything that different. Okay, I don't need Monster Squad style violence, but just something to make it stand out a little bit more. But then again, maybe you could argue that's a part of its charm. It's not an in-your-face movie, it's not a very obvious monster film. The journey and the build-up and the suspense maybe is what the star is supposed to be. It is a kid's film after all, and after hearing all the people that talk about and remember it, I guess it did leave a bigger impact than I imagined it probably would. It's a good film, I just don't think it's great. I think I get more sucked into the foggy shadows than I do the actual characters or story. But they still suck me in enough to want to know what's going to happen in the end. If you're looking for one of those classic, intense 80s kids films that are super dark and super shocking, this probably isn't it for you. But if you're looking for something to just put on that has a lot of atmosphere and a bit of a creepy vibe, this might be more up your alley. Think something like Are You Afraid of the Dark, except a little smarter and more elegant. Check it out next Halloween and see for yourself. Growing up in the 80s and 90s, we had a lot of various specials that always acted like they were gonna scare us. We had Tales from the Crypt, Are You Afraid of the Dark, Goosebumps, all sorts of various shows that kept explaining how they were gonna scare the crap out of us. And don't get me wrong, I like these shows, I think they're really creative, but there's always one problem to me. They were never scary. Even when I was a kid, I was saying to myself, where's the scary stuff? Where's the stuff that's gonna fuel my nightmares? Where's the stuff that's gonna keep me up? Watcher in the Woods is that movie. Yes, it's Disney, and yes, it's technically family-friendly, but it works like any great scary horror film. A lot of atmosphere, a lot of build-up, a lot of mystery, a lot of great shots, and a lot of creepy as well as clever imagery. The story is a family is looking in Britain for a new house to move into. They of course find a big creepy place that of course has this terrible backstory, an uncomfortable landlord, and all sorts of supernatural things happening around it. Both the daughters in the family seem to have strange things happening to them. The youngest is almost being taken over like a puppet, and the older has a tendency to feel the presence of people that were once there before or just feel all sorts of uncomfortable things. Slowly but surely, the truth about the disappearance of a certain girl named Karen comes to light, and the daughters are trying to figure out if it's the ghost of Karen that's trying to get in contact with them, or something else. What I like about this film is that there's very few things that actually separate it from a kid's scary film and a regular scary film. In fact, I think this film has a lot more atmosphere and scares than most scary films. The only difference is there's no gore, murdering, or swear words in it, as well as the pacing is a little quicker than that of a usual scary movie, but again, they want to keep the kids' attention. But apart from that, they treat it pretty adult. Notice how many quiet moments are in this. Yeah, remember that? You could have family films that had quiet moments. There didn't always need to be a ton of music or talking. This is called establishing mood, and it's done great here. The shots are also great. I absolutely love how they make these woods both beautiful and creepy at the same time. The cinematography surprisingly kind of has an Evil Dead feel to it. Obviously not as over the top, but just as clever with its setups. My favorite shot is right in the opening. It's just a car pulling into the place. Well, that's no biggie. Oh, well, that shot was kind of sloppily done. Wait a minute, why are we still rolling? Oh my god, this is a point of view shot. What's watching them? What's going on? Okay, it's not a big scare, but at the same time, it kinda catches you off your guard. It's setting up something you didn't know was being set up, and that's what a good scary film should do. The funny thing too is that there's a lot of point of view shots in this film, but just when you're about to get sick of them, they do something new with it. For example, here's a shot of her just going through the woods. Yeah, something's watching her, we've seen that a million times. But then at some point she goes inside and, wait a minute, it's still out there. Why would they show this shot if something wasn't gonna happen? And it does, and it was properly built up and properly delivered. And just when you think a shot like that can't make you uncomfortable again, there's another scene where she's being followed. Well, okay, again, we've seen that a million times. But wait a minute, now it's inside? We didn't know it could go inside. Every time we've seen it, it's always been outside. Every time they do something with a point of view shot, they add something new to put you in a new state of uncomfortableness. It doesn't downplay anything because it's also gonna be shown to kids. No, it wants to scare the kids because that's why you're seeing a scary movie. I always hated when those other shows had to clean it up and not make it too creepy. This goes all out there and tries to scare you without actually psychologically harming you. Kids can be drawn into smart things, and scary films can be smart. The only downside I have of this film is that the acting from the main character is not very good. It's really hokey and awkward and kind of reminds me of the girlfriend from Airplane.
But I did see something in the mist at the pond. That's why I fell in.
But even then, I don't mind too much because the whole film has such a strange feel to it that even the acting and its weirdness actually kind of blends in. The whole film's style is so uniquely its own that you kind of get used to it, and maybe it kind of adds to the weird feeling that you have throughout the entire movie. I don't want to give away too much, as part of the fun is being scared and surprised by it, but I will say it's very well done. I kind of don't know why more people aren't talking about it. I mean, it's a legit scary film from Disney. How often does that happen? I mean, we got scary moments from other films that scare us because we're kids, and yeah, some of them go really far, but this is actually intending throughout the majority of the film to scare you, and it's actually effective. Are scary movie fans just put off that the Disney logo is in front of it? Are Disney fans put off that it's a little too dark and not as obvious for kids? I don't know, but it definitely deserves a lot more attention. Okay, I don't think it's gonna send anyone out running and screaming, but at the same time, it just creates this mood and this environment that just feels strange and dark and creepy and, I don't know, personally, I just love it. I wish more scary films aimed at kids tried this hard. I don't know if it's a censorship issue or if people are just too afraid to push the limit, but there's gotta be more movies like this. I can tell you for certain I found a new film to watch every Halloween. The atmosphere, the environment, the story, the characters, the scares. I'm just in love with this film. It's definitely worth checking out with the lights off when you're all alone and you feel like somebody's watching you. I have never seen a film that looks like Dick Tracy. And I know a lot of people say that, oh, this imagery isn't like anything you've ever seen, blah, 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 but it's really true. I can't think of any other movie that looks like this. This might be the most ambitiously visual spectacle I've seen in years. It's crazy. The colors, the designs, the costumes, the makeup, it's totally insane. Which is why it really sucks that I can't remember a single friggin' thing about it. Is it that the visuals were so good it distracted from the rest of the story? Or is it that the story wasn't really that hot to begin with? Dick Tracy, based on the famous newspaper comic strip, is the yellow trench coat wearing cop played by Warren Beatty who's trying to take down the massive crime in his fair city. His arch nemesis, Big Boy, played by Al Pacino, is the yelling and screaming mob gangster who constantly wants to put him out of his way. He comes across a kid simply named Kid, a singer named Breathless Mahoney, played by Madonna, and all sorts of weird and literally colorful characters that constantly want to kill him. There's Flat Top Babyface, the Blank. They only get crazier and crazier. Okay, so the basic story is good guy versus bad guy, has cute kid sidekick, has a femme fatale, all the classic stuff you usually see in a lot of film noirs and so on. That part is easy to follow. What's not easy to follow is the steps they're taking to create this formula. There's a lot of talk of business, a lot of talk of fraud, a lot of talk of strategy, a lot of talk of planning, a lot of talk of breaking in, busting a person, and yeah, we see it happen, but what do we really know about these people? Aside from Al Pacino, who's really yucking it up as the bad guy, there's nothing memorable about these characters. Warren Beatty is a tough cop, and that's about it. Madonna is the hot singer, and that's about it. The wisecracking kid's a wisecracking kid, and that's about it. You get where I'm going with this? Hearing them talk is not very riveting, and it's constantly being distracted by how incredible the backgrounds are. When the action finally does start, it looks pretty cool, but what do I care if any of these people get axed off? A part of me kind of respects that they're trying to take such a cartoonily silly looking film so seriously, but on the other hand, I just wish it could have been more interesting. I remember in the credits it said that Dick Van Dyke was in this movie. Dick Van Dyke? Where the hell was he? Oh, there he is. God, I didn't even notice him. He's in and out of the film so fast that he's barely even worth the credit. If Dick Van freaking Dyke can't leave an impact on you in a movie, you know there's gotta be something wrong with it. On top of that, there's a lot of scenes in the movie that are just downright gruesome, especially for a Disney film. Early on, they take this one gangster down by tying him up, putting him in a box, covering him in wet cement, and then throwing him in the river. All while he's crying and sobbing the whole time. That's pretty fucking intense. Don't get me wrong, I like a little dark and gritty in Disney films, but that's like something right out of a nightmare. I guess to the film's credit, it's not that it's really bad or annoying, it's just kind of dull. Like I said, I can barely remember what actually happened in this movie. I just remember it looked beautiful while it was happening. With that said, yeah, it is friggin' unbelievable to look at. I mean, who would dress this way? Who would design their buildings this way? Who would choose these colors? Who would have faces this bizarrely weird? Nobody would. It's obviously taking the idea of adapting the comic strip, which was very bright, colorful, and over the top, to a whole new level. It's definitely in its own unique world, one where the backgrounds don't even have to look that convincing. I mean, look at this. This is so obviously a matte painting. They're not even trying to hide the brushstrokes. But that's just part of the style. It all looks phony, but in the same way that a puppeteer holding a puppet you know is phony, but you don't care. It's just so well done that you enjoy every second of it. So I'm kind of torn on the movie. On the one hand, I'm glad I saw it, if for any other reason, just to see it. But on the other hand, yeah, why couldn't they make the story more interesting? Why couldn't they flesh out the characters more? Why couldn't they be a lot more fun? Like I said, Pacino's great, but everyone else is just so phoned in and standard. Just because they look distinct doesn't mean they act distinct. I remember the makeup and the layout much more than I remember anything else in this film, and that's really a shame. If this did have a memorable story and characters, maybe it could be like one of the great film noirs. A film that plays to incredibly heavy shadows, but also somehow incredibly heavy colors. It could have been sort of this one-of-a-kind masterpiece. But as is, it's really just a style over substance movie. If you want to see the style and you just enjoy watching people in trench coats and fedora hats punch each other and shoot, then you'll at least be glad that you saw it. But if none of that does it for you, then I'm sad to say this is a very unfortunate skip. It's the holiday classic, The Nightmare Before Christmas. Boy, talk about a film that only did okay at the box office but just exploded in cult merchandise. Every year around Halloween you see this stuff advertised, and hell, every year around Christmas you see it advertised as well. Somewhere the appreciation of this film just went through the roof, and now everybody loves to draw the characters, they love to sing the songs, it's so iconic. But once again, I almost feel like that can backfire and build it up too much for audiences that might be expecting something else. In a sense, that's kind of what I went through when I first saw it. And I saw it when it first came out. It was advertised on TV, Tim Burton's name was plastered all over it, and it came out around the same time that movies like Aladdin, Lion King, and so many other anime groundbreakers came out. So with that said, I thought there would probably be a few more adult jokes thrown in there, you know, like what they did with Robin Williams improvising and so on. But that's not the kind of movie it is. It's more a warped version of those stop-motion Christmas specials that you see every year, except dragged out to an hour and a half. It seems all the holidays are given their own land, Halloween Town, Christmas Town, all that kind of stuff. The leader of Halloween, Jack Skellington, is finally getting tired of his holiday and wants to try something new. Thus, he accidentally stumbles across the Christmas holiday and decides he wants to take it for his own. Showing the people of Halloween what he's discovered and even kidnapping Santa Claus himself, Jack decides he's gonna transform a Merry Christmas into a Scary Christmas. Instead of bringing treats and toys, he's gonna bring creeps and scares, ultimately resulting in a disastrous catastrophe. The movie has a lot going for it. First of all, the story's wonderful. It's so simple in its setup and yet allows for so much creativity. It's bizarrely very easy to explain and even easier to grasp. The visuals, of course, being a Tim Burton production, are gonna be wonderful. And not only that, the music's gonna be spectacular. This is the first time in years Danny Elfman has been allowed to write songs again, and man, do they knock it out of the park. You know these songs. This is Halloween, what's this, what's this? Making Christmas, the list goes on. Elfman himself does the singing voice of Jack, and he adds so much character to it. This whole film is practically his movie. But what people might be turned off by, especially those who have had it hyped up, is that it is maybe a little too simple. At least for what people might be expecting. The movie doesn't have a lot of inside jokes or super clever writing, it's sort of very bare bones. Because of this, it doesn't allow for a ton of character or a ton of surprises, but that's not really the focus. It's supposed to operate more like a very basic fairy tale, like a book you'd read to your little kid. In fact, hell, it was originally a book, and in rhyme too. Some might have a problem with this, and it's understandable. They could have updated it a little bit more, they could have made the characters a bit more interesting. But for a lot of people, the simplicity is what draws them to it. It's a timeless story that can be told to anyone, and anyone can grasp it very quickly. It's similar to something like The Boy Who Cried Wolf. You don't need to know the boy's backstory, you don't need to know his character, you just need to know the very simple layout. Now, is that good for an hour and a half movie? Some would debate no. Me personally, I think there's enough creativity with the songs, the atmospheres, the designs, and even the very basic characteristics that I think it works okay. I'd be lying if I said this was one of my absolute favorite Tim Burton films. I mean, it's good and I really like it, and I can hear those songs over and over. But it's not something I really watch because the characters are so deep or the emotions are so rich. I'll watch something like Batman or Edward Scissorhands for that. Nightmare Before Christmas is just a very simple yet still very clever and creative kid's story. And like I said, the simplicity is what helps it sell and what helps it stay around for so long. I think that's one of the reasons it wasn't a monster hit when it came out, but people still seem to talk about it and buy merchandise from it all the time. They appreciate the basicness of it, in the same way they appreciate the basicness of Santa Claus, and can immediately connect it to the holiday, or in this case, 2 holidays. I say I appreciate it more than I like it, but I do still enjoy putting it on every once in a while. The songs, the imagery, the creativity, they're just a little too strong for me to resist. It's a simple film that knew just how much to deliver, and how much to let you take away from it. And it doesn't look like it'll be leaving anytime soon. A lot of times when people try to take a successful TV show and make a movie out of it, the number one complaint is that it just seems like a longer version of an episode. But with DuckTales, it kinda makes sense because every episode was kinda like a mini movie. So why not make an actual movie out of it? In this case, it definitely pays off, and it's kind of a shame it doesn't get more attention than it deserves. It's funny because this came out near the same time as The Rescuers Down Under, another adventurous Disney film that doesn't get enough attention. It has all the great animation, the characters you remember, a lot of great action, a few good jokes. It's an enjoyable family film. Scrooge McDuck and the gang are on the search for the treasure of Kali Baba, get it? But their tour guide, named Dijon, is working for an evil sorcerer named Murloc, played by Christopher Lloyd.
Just keep searching while I hunt outside! They will not escape!
He knows that the real treasure of Kali Baba lies in this magic lamp, and that with his magic talisman that can turn him into any animal, can combine it with the lamp to get unlimited wishes. The lamp, however, falls out of his hands and instead into the hands of Huey, Dewey, Louie, and Webby, who discover the crazy genie inside, played by Rick Taylor. He's zany and goofy, of course, and befriends the kids very quickly. Once Scrooge discovers it, he uses it, of course, for greedy means, and while being chased down by the evil sorcerer, he discovers what truly matters and blah blah blah, action, learning a lesson, all that good stuff. Okay, so there's no groundbreaking morals there to be learned here, but that's not what DuckTales was all about. In fact, DuckTales wasn't even as much about action as it was adventure. And this is a really enjoyable adventure. I feel like all the characters we've grown to love get the proper amount of screen time that they deserve. Christopher Lloyd is menacing, of course, as the villain, and Rip Taylor is an adequate genie. I do feel bad because shortly after, a much funnier Disney genie would pop about that nobody could really compete with. But for something that's more focused on kids and family and not really adult jokes, I think he works okay. It's fine because the animation on the show was already pretty impressive, so they had to up it even more for the movie, and it really looks good. The only thing that might raise a few eyebrows is the character of Dijon. I don't know, is this an offensive character now?
Oh, good golly, what a time we have been having. Yes, I was just now leaving. Goodbye.
Back then, nobody thought twice about it, but nowadays with people's sensitivities, I'm not sure if this could be taken the wrong way or not. I mean, he does have a thick accent, and he is a thief. I personally never thought they were saying anything about an entire race, but maybe that's why it never got such a major DVD release. I don't know, he's fine by me, but some people might take it a different way. Like I said before, it's just one big DuckTales episode, but we all really like the DuckTales episodes and what they had to give us, and here it is on a grand scale. I'd be lying if I said it was as good as the original few episodes that were tied together in the beginning. But hey, we're doing a movie now, and you gotta play by movie rules, and for playing by movie rules, I think this film does really well. And it's entertaining and it's engaging. Does it have a ton of adult stuff? Not especially, I'd say it's more family oriented. But there's nothing wrong with that. It's done well, it's done creatively, and it's a whole lot of fun. So if you like the show growing up or you're a big fan of adventure, this is definitely one to check out. Well, if you saw my original Disneycember review of 101 Dalmatians, you probably won't be that shocked that I think pretty much the same thing about the live-action one. Which is funny because in many respects it is exactly like the original and yet completely different. The story is exactly the same. The characters are exactly the same. The setting is exactly the same. But there is, however, one major difference. The dogs don't talk. A lot of people I remember when this was coming out were really angry and shocked at that. Oh my god, how can the dogs not talk? They talked in the original, holy smokes! And what's it all amount to? Well, very much like the animated one, it's just a movie about watching puppies. And if you like to watch puppies, you'll like this film fine. The story centers around a male Dalmatian and his owner, played by Jeff Daniels, who has his eye on a female Dalmatian, who has a pretty attractive owner as well. Of course, both the dogs and the humans meet up and they decide to get together. Over time, they get married and eventually the female dog gets pregnant, giving birth to 15 adorable puppies. But an evil villain named Cruella de Vil, played by Glenn Close, wants to buy the puppies so she can turn them into fur coats. When the owners tell her that they're not for sale, she hires two henchmen, one of them played by Hugh Laurie, to kidnap the puppies and add them to her collection. That's right, a collection, for she plans to make tons of fur coats out of tons of puppies, 99 to be exact. When the parents as well as other animals catch word, the race is on to see if they can save the puppies before they're turned into fashion statements. On the one hand, I say to myself, this is a completely pointless movie to exist. Did this really demand to be brought to the live-action cinema? But with that said, if you had to bring it to live action cinema, I actually think it's pretty reasonably done. I really applaud the fact that they don't have them talk. Not only was the technology not up to it back then, I mean, they could move the lips, but they look kinda creepy. But the movie knows exactly what the people want. They just want to see cute dogs, and if they start talking, it would just be really weird and distracting. Thus, we had to rely on the charm of the human characters, which for the most part hold up pretty well. I mean, for such bit parts that have little to them, they actually got some really good actors to bring them to life. The romantic couple are good, the henchmen are good, and yeah, let's talk about Glenn Close as Cruella de Vil. On the one hand, I should be really angry at this performance because, yeah, Cruella de Vil is an over-the-top character, but this is really over the top. Cruella was an angry, bitter woman. This is just a laughing lunatic. She's more like a 60s Batman villain than she is a Disney villain, and god, doesn't that sound weird to say? She's making animated Disney villains look subtle. However, with that said, she just cracks me the fuck up. It's kinda like a female Tim Curry or Christopher Walken. There's just no doubt that she's doing whatever the hell she wants. I mean, look at her. She's totally off her rocker.
If we make this coat, it would be as if I were wearing your dog. Woof, woof.
How can you not crack up at this? Maybe the way to look at it is not that she absolutely captured the original animated character, but she turned it into something 100% different and just ran all the way with it. Hell, ran to the fucking moon with it, she's so over the top.
My cozy puppy coat.
I just can't stop laughing at her, she's a fucking riot. For what it is, the film is really not that bad. It's 100% serviceable. I can't really see anyone going into this movie being incredibly disappointed. I mean, what do you think you're going to see? You're gonna see Glenn Close over the top and you're gonna see cute puppies. That's it. And as that setup goes, it's obvious they put a lot of effort into it. I think the only people that would really want to see them talk are the same people that go see Santa Paws. But I give this movie credit that it tries to be visually interesting, it tries to cast some good people, it tries to tell a lot of the story through silence, which can be very difficult to do. So I guess I appreciate it more than I actually like it. I guess I like it a little better than the anime version, it's just I didn't really even get into the anime version that much. I think it's very simple. If you really like dogs, especially Dalmatians, you'll really like this. And yeah, if you just want to see an actress go batshit insane, it's actually kind of fun to watch for that too. You looking for a fun little family film with cute little animals that's not going to offend anybody? This definitely hits the spot. When Wreck-It Ralph first came out, the term that was being thrown around a lot is that it was the Roger Rabbit of video game movies. And from the advertising, it kinda looked like that. You saw kind of a Donkey Kong-ish knockoff suddenly in with all these really famous characters. There's Bowser, there's a bunch of Street Fighter guys, there's the ghost from Pac-Man. Nothing like this has ever been done in a movie, at least not with video games. It really was the equivalent of seeing Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny together. It was so surreal. However, where in Roger Rabbit a lot of these characters keep popping up throughout the entire film, in this one it's only the first couple minutes. Because of this, there was definitely a crowd of people that kind of felt ripped off. I mean, the commercials, they showed every scene that had a video game character in it. So when you actually watched the film, there was practically nothing left. I kinda like those people, wanted a little bit more of them, but the good news is, the story and characters were so good that you almost don't notice. Much like Roger Rabbit, the story can completely hold up on its own even if you didn't have those characters in there. The main leads and ideas are more than enough to keep it afloat. The film starts off in an arcade where there's an old 80s game called Fix-It Felix. The villain of the game is Wreck-It Ralph, kind of a Donkey Kong style character that doesn't get much respect. Little do we know, there's a whole video game world going on right under our noses. Characters use the plugs and wires to all meet up in one location to shoot the shit, talk nonsense, all that good stuff. But Ralph, like a lot of video game villains, is not feeling very loved. He's feeling underappreciated as the bad guy of the game, and wants more attention for the important work that he does. So he starts game hopping to find some way to get his reward. The only thing he can figure is that if he got a medal somehow, that would mean that he's done a great deed. So he travels into one of the much more violent video games, gets his medal, but loses it in another one. Along the way, he comes across a glitch named Vanellope, who lives in kind of a Mario Kart world where nobody likes her either. So they make a deal with one another. If Ralph can help her get in the game and get the appreciation she deserves, she'll help him get his medal back and get him the appreciation he deserves. But there's an even bigger conspiracy going on between villains, side characters, and all sorts of craziness that might result in the end of the video game world as we know it. I'm really impressed how even though it's kind of a complicated story when you get down to it, they explain it in a very simple way. The film is very good at throwing in different surprises and turns around every corner in explaining how the world works. Through warp zones and cheat codes, you can actually change your identity and anything about your environment. Really, the movie takes total advantage of what's given to them. It isn't just using popular video game characters, it's totally embracing the idea of what they have, incorporating both the retro games of the past and the newer games of today. Through all the clever writing and satire though, there's also a very heartfelt story between Vanellope and Ralph. This is the focus of the film, and yeah, I would have liked to see a few more video game characters. This really is where the attention should be. The voice acting in this is beyond pitch perfect. I mean, talk about getting the best people to match these characters. John C. Reilly is the big doofus who has a heart of gold. Sarah Silverman is the smart aleck little brat. Jane Lynch is the badass commander with a backstory so funny I dare not ruin it here. The list goes on. This is one of those movies that does so well in combining really great humor in with the story that it's telling. They almost go hand in hand, like something that's a pretty funny joke can also be a major plot device. The explanation about why Vanellope has to be kept out of the game is actually both really funny and really heartbreaking. Even though these are just video game characters and you play them all the time, you really get wrapped up in what they're going through. You want to see Ralph get his medal, you want to see Vanellope win the race, you want to see all sorts of good things happen to them and overcome evil. And all along the way you're getting these great in-jokes that you don't need to know in order to follow it, but it just makes it all the more enjoyable if you do. I say my only hang-up with the film is that we get a little bit of that forced scene where the good guy has to be bad in order to not hurt the other good guy, and it's, okay, not a misunderstanding or liar reveal story, but you know the drill. Just when they're becoming the best of friends, one of them has to do something really mean to hurt the other one, but it's also in order to save them, and honestly, if it hadn't been done a million times before, it probably would have worked fine here. I mean, they do explain everything pretty well. But you just know, after their little fight and moping and doping around, one of them has to come to a realization and go back and say they're sorry, and then we can begin the climax. I know we need conflict, I know we need drama, but we also need a little variety, and this has been done a lot of times before. The climax itself is also a little mundane. I mean, at first it's great, starting off with this race and people jumping on top of other cars and stuff, but then you go into this fight on top of a mountain with one of the characters turning into a big monster, and it's not awful, it's just, again, we've seen this a million times and there isn't anything that new to it. But honestly, those are small gripes. Wreck-It Ralph has really likable characters, a very clever setup, and a story environment that makes you realize you don't need as much of the gimmicks as you thought you would. Yeah, it's neat to see Zangief, yeah, it's neat that they reference Lara Croft, but that's not what the movie's about, nor should it be what it's about. It's about a connection between these two polar opposites who also happen to be outsiders, and so they find a way to band together. All while throwing in some really funny side characters and some really great humor. You may not get as many classic characters as you want, but you'll definitely get a whole bunch of new ones that are just as good. You know, it's funny, when I saw Monsters, Inc., the first thing I thought to myself was, yeah, that was okay, but I wonder what they could do with a sequel. I'm assuming if you're watching this, you know how the first film ends, so with that ending, you do kind of see a little bit of possibility. What if Boo did grow up? What if Sullivan kept watching her? What if she became an adult who could actually communicate with monsters? Or maybe when she got to an age she didn't believe in monsters anymore. Maybe monsters would disappear. Maybe it's something about losing childhood. Oh my god, this practically writes itself. But instead, Pixar said, fuck it, let's just do 80s college movies. Yeah, because those two go so hand in hand. Rather than being a sequel, we have a prequel, showing how Mike and Sullivan met up for the first time and of course, didn't get along. Each one thinks they're gonna be the greatest student at Monster University, so naturally all sorts of competition and comedic antics take place. But this menacing dean decides she doesn't like them. Yeah, I don't entirely know why, she just kinda decides she doesn't like them. Maybe because that's what they do in 80s college movies, I don't know. And speaking of which, if you've seen any 80s college movies, I mean any friggin' 80s college movies, you've seen Monsters U. It's not a satire of 80s college films, that would be funny. It's not doing anything different with 80s college films, again, that would be funny. All it's doing is taking the exact same characters you've seen a million times and replacing them with monsters. The bully jock, the nerdy worm, the stick-in-the-mud dean, the quirky dorks, the need to make their frat house the greatest frat house that there is, and of course, all these people who don't get along trying to find a way to get along in the end. I remember when I saw the trailer for this, I thought it looked really stupid, but I also remember thinking to myself, it's Pixar. Pixar, the originators of these incredible stories. Finding Nemo, Up, The Incredibles, the friggin' Toy Story films. Surely they wouldn't do something as phoned in as this. But then I remembered Cars 2 and got really depressed. Outside of a few designs of some of the monsters, it's amazing the lack of originality this film has. Everything exists just to follow the 80s college movies tropes. I remember before seeing Muppets Most Wanted, they had a short based on Monsters U, and you know what? It was a million times more interesting. They took advantage of their environment and did something new with it. The only problem is, that was just a few minutes long. This is an hour and a friggin' half. It's easily one of the most boring Pixar films I've ever sat through. You can predict every joke, you can predict every moment that's gonna happen. Why was this deserving of so much time and effort to go into it? The only new thing that pops up in this film is the ending, and without giving away too much, it is probably the only really good thing in it. It's kind of the idea that you don't need to follow the traditional path that everybody else does, but it's done in a way that's actually kind of clever and probably hits close to home for a lot of people. In fact, if I had to guess, I would assume this whole film was made just so it could get this message across. It's a message you don't see much in movies, and especially in animated family films. Well then, I guess we had the Pixar equivalent of Meet the Robinsons, something that has a really good message but not the best means of displaying it. But hell, even Meet the Robinsons was so strange and bizarre you could kind of admire it for how odd it is. This is more like a textbook about how they made Animal House. Hell, even watching a movie about the making of Animal House would be more interesting than watching this. I've had a lot of fans upset with me that I didn't like this film, but I'm sorry, I just think it's awful. I tried to go in with a clear mind. I tried to open up to the idea that this could somehow work. But it just sucks out all the funny, all the originality, all the interesting characters, all the neat story ideas for such a stale experience. I guess there's nothing bad in it in terms of stuff that'd be like offensive or unwatchable for your kids, but for anyone who's an adult and has seen 80s college movies to death and wants to move on to something else, this is a definite film to scare you away. I can't describe the hate for the Lone Ranger that surrounded it when it first came out. Even from the previews, people were just kind of rolling their eyes saying, really? Really? I'm not gonna lie, I kind of had that reaction looking at the trailers too. But when the critics got hold of it and the few people that actually went to see it, by God, they just despised it. They said it was overly long, terribly written, horribly acted, and just made no sense half the time. So I guess a large part of me was really dreading having to review this film, but so many people have been talking about it, I guess it kind of made sense to do so. Having finally seen it, are they right? Well, yeah, but I don't know if I hate it as much as everybody else does. It is definitely a bad movie, and it is way too long. But a part of me does kind of say, if this came out 10 years ago, say before the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, I kind of wonder if it would have gotten a warmer reception. It might have been that really bizarre, distinct Western that's never really been done in this way before. But because it did come out after Pirates of the Caribbean, and is even done by the same people, everyone just sort of saw it as phoned-in pirates except in the Old West. And yeah, they're pretty much right. I guess a part of me does see a little bit of possibility with pirates in the Old West though. Not much, but a little. The story opens with Johnny Depp as the famous Indian named Tonto. He has a job just standing around in a museum. I don't get it, but the makeup's neat. and he comes across a boy who's interested in the story of the Lone Ranger. Well, since he was there, he tells the boy to sit back for 2.5 hours and listen to his origin story. The Lone Ranger was originally a lawyer who had a very successful brother who was a lawman. One day, after chasing down an escaped convict, both of them are gunned down and even his brother's heart is eaten by the villain. Isn't that lovely? But Tonto is fascinated when the spiritual horse seems to pick our main character to be brought back to life. Tonto doesn't believe him as he knows he's an inexperienced action hero. But the horse has made his choice, so Tonto decides to take him up as his partner, bring him back to the world of the living, and follow him to get justice and/or revenge on the people who killed him and his brother. Along the way, they come across all sorts of strange characters, colorful baddies, and comedy ranging from the goofy to the downright grotesque. I get the feeling a lot of the worst parts were already kind of told to me, like the guy eating the heart or Johnny Depp being in the museum for no reason and some of the really stupid jokes. So I guess expecting that going in, I paid a little bit more attention to the stuff that I actually kind of enjoyed. I mean, okay, it's over the top and silly, but that's kind of what I expected with a Pirates of the Caribbean Western. Everyone said Johnny Depp was just doing Jack Sparrow as an Indian in this version, and yeah, I see where they're coming from, but I don't know if I quite see it as that bad. I still think he's a good actor, and yeah, sort of the bug-eyed and closed-lipped thing is getting a little old, but he still kept my interest enough. Now, of course, why he was chosen to play a Native American when there's about a million other actors that are more qualified to do so, I'm not sure. Well, yeah, I do. He's a star, money, all that stuff. I know everyone says he's like 1/90th Native American, but how about somebody who's like majority Native American? Wouldn't that make a little bit more sense? Our main lead does a good job being the fish out of water in this new territory, trying to follow the law while also breaking it, and being fairly charismatic throughout most of it. The villains are mostly a bore, once again tying into some sort of complicated plot about the railroad and land ownership, and oh, who cares, we just want to see cowboys be cowboys. When it does do that, it's kinda neat, in that it's really weird. These are very bizarre towns with very bizarre people in them. But a part of me kinda likes that, because I don't see that much in westerns. I was even kinda liking the way they visually told the story. For example, there's this woman with a wooden leg who also wants revenge on the same person. Even though her business seems booming, she says that he ruined her career. Literally, all they do is show a picture of her as a ballet dancer, and you get it. No tons of dialogue, no big explanation scenes, it's just one picture and boom, you understand. I like a movie that can do that. I only wish the rest of the movie was like that. At some point I found myself getting really bored and I looked on the DVD how long it was, and we weren't even at the halfway point yet. Good God, why does Hollywood nowadays think that if something has to be really big and epic, it has to be super long? Not every movie needs to be Lord of the Rings. Not every movie has to be Lawrence of Arabia. The same thing happened with the Pirates movies. Stop trying to be these gigantic epics. Just be what you're supposed to be. Be the friggin' Lone Ranger. Cowboy, shooting, having fun. Let the epics be the epics and you be something that's enjoyably mindless. And I know it's ironic me saying that, seeing how I did an anniversary film that was 3.5 hours long, but that had a lot of characters in it, to be fair. This is two guys that we're following for an unbelievable amount of time. I don't care who you put in that role, that's gonna get boring after a while. So yeah, is the movie good? Absolutely not. Is it terrible? Probably. But a good chunk of that comes from the timing. If this was released before the Pirates of the Caribbean films, I think it would have had a little bit more of a chance, and it would have been seen as original and unique and strange and dark and just a movie unlike any other movie. Still having the problems I said before, with it being way too long and such, but I don't think it would have gotten quite the extreme hatred that it's getting today. I'm glad I saw parts of it. I mean, it was just so creatively bizarre. But what does any of it have to do with the original idea of the Lone Ranger and the cowboys and the Indians and just riding around and having fun? Not much. This feels like Disney knew it hit something big with the Pirates franchise, so they tried to have lightning strike twice. Hell, you could argue even the Pirates franchise it didn't strike twice. The result is a little too much of what we've already seen before, and even then, not done that great. I guess even at its worst, this director's work is just so strange that I always find something of bizarre value to it. So I'm not quite as pissed off as everybody else was at it, but yeah, it's still bad. Not the worst in my opinion, but sadly not worth checking out either. A kind of rolled my eyes when I heard they were making a Maleficent movie. I mean, it just seems like a pointless thing to do. Maleficent is a great villain, one of the great villains. She's so charismatic and evil and loves every minute of it and is elegant and clever and diabolical. She's given just the right amount of screen time in the original Sleeping Beauty. So the idea of learning more about her past didn't seem too bright, but at the same time, I was open to it, I guess. When the film finally came out, it became very obvious what they were trying to do. It's the Wicked formula again, trying to take a fairy tale we all thought we knew and tell it in a different way where the bad guy doesn't look so bad. When I figured that out, which you can very quickly in this film, I just sort of shrugged and said, whatever, just give me some pleasing eye candy. It did, and I didn't think too much of it. But then later, when I really thought about it, it started to piss me off. Like, really piss me off. I thought about what they were trying to do to one of the great villains, one of the great Disney icons, turning the mistress of all evil into a simple case of misunderstanding, turning three of the most likable comic reliefs into these idiotic morons, turning an iconic Disney fairy tale that has its flaws but was still pretty damn creative into every other poorly CG'd stale story that comes out about fairy tales nowadays. You know what? This movie really sucks. A lot. We start off with the backstory of Maleficent as a little girl, who apparently had wings originally. Okay, this is because she was a fairy. Alright, well, she looks kinda cool, so we'll go with it. She then meets a human boy and they grow up falling in love, but then he finds out when he's older that if he kills Maleficent, he'll be given unbelievable power. But he can't quite do that because he's too nice, I guess? So he decides to cut off her wings instead. She decides from this day on that she hates all humanity and is just gonna be evil. Years later, the king marries and eventually has a daughter, and you know how this goes. Maleficent comes to the party, curses the daughter, and says when she turns 16, she'll prick her finger on a spinning wheel and die. Once again, the fairies are called in to take her away and raise her, but get a load of this. Maleficent always knows where the baby is, and because the fairies are too stupid to raise a child, Maleficent actually kinda raises her herself. 'Cause, you know, she's not so bad after all. Once the child grows up, she eventually bumps into Prince Charming, they fall in love, and all this time Maleficent is not only watching, but actually getting on pretty good with her. Because, yeah, this is what we want to see. One of the greatest villains of all time having girl talk. Talking about feelings, chilling, laughing, having all sorts of fun. What the fuck am I watching? It finally gets to a point where Maleficent doesn't want the princess to die. So she knocks out the prince and tries to get them back together because if she does fall in love and pricks her finger, maybe he can wake her up. And meanwhile, the king has gone crazy just because, and he vows to set a trap for Maleficent. Yeah, kind of a shock he didn't do that before. So it's a battle between Maleficent, the hero, and the princess's father, the villain. Yeah, I can tell they really got the idea about what Disney Sleeping Beauty was all about. I won't give away what happens in the end, but remember what they did in Frozen with the true love thing, and how they did a little bit of a twist on it? Yeah, they do that here too, except it was already done in Frozen, so it's not really a twist anymore. I guess there's one or two good things in this. Some of the visuals are a little neat. Most of them are pretty standard and not rendered very well. Angelina Jolie looks pretty cool as Maleficent. She's got that devilish smile and a cool look here or there. But while her acting's not really bad, it's not really anything that great either. The actor playing the king is awful. I mean, really bad. I guess he's supposed to be like this really complex character, but he just sort of has these weird mood swings and out of nowhere goes nuts, and none of it's convincing, and it all sounds so silly.
They brought you back a day too soon. I told those three idiots. Lock her up in her room.
Something about his voice, I can't explain it. I don't know if it's the inflections or the pitch or whatever, but he just annoys the crap out of me.
She's only sleeping forever!
And everything else, like I said, is trying to turn this story into something it isn't. Which, okay, Wicked did something like that, and Once Upon a Time did something like that, and they seem to work out okay. But that's part of the problem. They already did it. If you're going to do it now, you have to add something really new or really groundbreaking. Wicked had good writing and characters and music outside of the fact that it was a twist on a story we already know. This is just so standard, and not only that, it takes characters that you already loved, and instead of making them charming in a new way, it just sucks out anything that made them unique. The fairies? Good God! I mean, there's dumb, and then there's just insultingly dumb. It's almost like the writer of this movie just didn't like the person who created the fairies originally or something and just really wanted to stick it to them. I mean, they are just so terribly written. I know this is done so that Maleficent looks more like the star, but come on, this is downright degrading. And like I said, Maleficent herself is just not that interesting. I guess this could be kind of a neat spin, seeing how we all know the story, and yeah, it is kind of juicy with her getting her wings chopped off and hating all humanity and stuff and trying to go through a change. But nobody is written with any charm or charisma. I give the actors credit that they're trying to add charm and charisma, but there's just so little to work off of. Nothing about it cries that somebody had this great idea and really wanted to tell this story in a brand new way that was gonna just change the way you look at everything. It's obviously just trying to do what everybody else is doing, and in the process, it insults some of our greatest Disney characters. The fairies were awesome, don't try to make them stupid. Maleficent was great, don't try to make her good. The kings were charming, don't try to make them this asshole. I don't know, if you want more reasons why I hate it, go watch the honest trailers of it. I guess if you're just looking for something that's kinda pretty, a touch creative, and reminds you a little bit of those classic fairy tales, then it's a harmless waste of time. But if you're looking for something that's gonna suck you in and you can't wait what's gonna happen next, and it's very psychological and intriguing and, I don't know, anything not stale and hasn't been done a million times, then you can definitely give this one a pass. It's Disney's runaway hit, Frozen. Just a little over a year since it came out and people still won't shut up about this movie. It's a cultural phenomenon. I have not seen an animated film from Disney get this much attention since Lion King. Everybody's still singing the songs, everybody's still quoting the lines, everybody's still selling the merchandise. It's just a monster. Like probably most of you, I kind of agree it's all over the place and most likely overplayed. But I'm not gonna lie, I'm one of those people that loves it just as much as anyone else. The story is about two princesses named Elsa and Anna. Elsa has a curse where she can control the cold. She can make it snow, shoot ice beams, create snowmen, all sorts of craziness. But one night as a little kid, she accidentally almost kills her sister. Her mom and dad take them to a group of rock gnomes who say that they can save her, but they have to keep the power a secret. So they erase Anna's memory and decide that it's best to keep them as far apart as possible, in hopes that her power won't hurt her anymore. Years go by, and after the parents tragically die, the two of them grow up into polar opposites. Elsa, not surprisingly, is an awkward introvert, and Anna is a social butterfly ready to open up to anybody. On the day of Elsa's coronation as queen, Anna accidentally reveals Elsa's powers to everybody, causing Elsa to run away and leave the entire kingdom in ice. So it's up to Anna to find her sister and convince her to come back and stop all this winter. Along her way, she comes across a climber named Kristoff, a magical snowman named Olaf, and all sorts of crazy adventures trying to not only save the kingdom, but her sister as well. There are so many things to talk about with this movie, it's hard to know where to even start. Probably the thing I'm impressed with most is their ability to break certain cliches while still holding true to others that make Disney so popular. But they do it in a way that's not so obvious. It feels very natural in the way they set up these characters. I thought back to films like Enchanted where they just hammered the lesson in that they're going against these Disney cliches, and here it just felt like it was part of a story they would tell even if it wasn't Disney related, because it ties into what's going on nowadays and will continue to happen in the future. For example, there is still a romance that blooms in only a few days, but they also mock the fact that she's going to marry somebody that she just met, which of course is a big criticism of female leads in the past. But this also makes sense for the character. She has been shut away for so long that she would just give herself to anybody. It's a new experience and she would be excited, but this movie is showing the dangers of it. In fact, originally, I was kinda against the idea that there was sort of a last-minute villain thrown in, but without giving away too much, this once again shows a really good lesson. The surprise reveal shows the danger of being too trusting to anybody, which is not only a good lesson for kids, but a really good lesson for kids nowadays. With the social media and everybody on it so often, both Anna and Elsa are perfect extremes to learn something from. Elsa is an introvert who wants to stay away from people, much like how some people can just be glued to their computers and phones and not go outside that much. People need to know how to socially interact if they're going to survive. But Anna has the opposite problem. If you reveal too much about yourself and will just give your heart to anybody, again, like a lot of people on the social media do, there can be a downside to that as well. The characters are also likable. Not only do we have two princesses in this, but one of them who's on the queen isn't evil, is actually really respectable and smart, and the other isn't so dainty and basic. She's really funny. They don't mind if they make her a little bit of a ditz here or there because it's totally explained why. The situation totally backs up why she would be this way, but at the same time, she's very likable. You love her passion. And there is something so nice knowing that the majority of the humor that comes from this movie comes from the main characters and not all just in comic relief. The main characters can be funny and goofy. But with that said, even the obvious comic relief they do bring in isn't really that bad. I don't think Olaf is a hilarious character, but I got a laugh out of him once in a while, and he wasn't annoying. Where most Disney sidekicks get a lot of their humor from yelling and being loud, this one actually whispers a lot of his jokes. I haven't really seen that in a Disney fairy tale, and it's actually really effective and funny. The music, what can I say? You're all still humming these tunes. Let It Go, You Want to Build a Snowman for the First Time in Forever. I remember when I was first talking about these songwriters in the Winnie the Pooh movie, and I said I so wanted them to go on to something because these are such great songs. Holy shit, did they get rewarded for their talents. People are still singing these songs. They're releasing it in theaters with little sing-along lyrics at the bottom. It's just insane how popular they are. And what I love about it too is that the songs help the movie and tell the story. That's what the Disney musicals did. They didn't just say let's get a pop star like Elton John to write 5 songs that honestly if you took them out you wouldn't miss that much in terms of story. Or someone like Phil Collins who just sort of sings in the background that you could have just replaced with orchestral music and nothing would change whatsoever. These are songs that actually explain what the characters are going through and move the story forward. And they're done fantastically. I know I did a Nostalgia Critic video criticizing the fact that it's played all over the place, and yeah, it is. I'm not gonna act like it isn't. We are overplaying it. I'm sure it's driving most people insane. But the sad truth is, I'm one of those obnoxious people who plays it over and over. That doesn't mean I won't make fun of it, but yeah, I'm one of those morons who does it. But to be fair, I only listen to it in my car, without any kids to play it for. Actually, this is sounding really pathetic, but I don't care! I love the music that much! The film is also gorgeous looking. I could almost see people whipping this out around every Christmas. Look at the way they shoot winter, look at the colors, look at the angles, look at the landscapes. I could get lost in this winter. I want to live in this winter. Which, I know I kinda do, but this one looks nicer. If I did have a problem with anything, I would say that the backstory is really rushed. I know for some people those elements can really turn them off, as I've heard their major criticisms like why they did do this to the 2 little girls and shouldn't have grown them up this way and so on and so forth. And I get it, it is kind of a plot hole and in the development of our main characters that sort of causes all this. But personally I give it a little bit of a leeway because I say that's kind of the fairy tale element. Sort of like how is Luke Skywalker firing one torpedo gonna blow up the entire Death Star? Or how is it the Joker took down the Batplane with 1 bullet from his gun? It's one of those creative liberties that, for me, is worth going through to get to the best parts of the story. With that said, Frozen is one of my top 10 favorite Disney films. Hell, maybe even top 5. It brought me right back into that feeling that I was seeing something big and grand and Disney. And on top of that, it was a fairy tale. When's the last time you saw a traditional fairy tale take the world by storm? I don't mean something like Tangled that was a hit or Once Upon a Time that's doing well. I mean like take over the world. It's been a while, but it's great to see again. And yeah, like I said, it is probably being exploited a little too much and all over the place. But hell, I'd much rather have kids and adults rewatch this than say Transformers or Twilight. This one has so much more creativity and intelligence to it. And music, and visuals, and characters, and I'm just gushing all over it again. It's one of the few films I can just proclaim as an instant classic. A film you can guarantee years from now millions of people are still gonna be watching and sharing with their kids. Hell, with other adults. I'd say go check it out, but who the hell hasn't? Just go watch it again. I know I'm going to, and have a hell of a lot of fun doing it. It only figures to celebrate Christmas Day with a Christmas movie, and The Muppet Christmas Carol seems to be a good one to talk about. It's so interesting that for so many younger people, this is their introduction to the classic Charles Dickens tale. I shouldn't see that as a bad thing, seeing how The Mickey Christmas Carol was my introduction to it. And truth be told, it's not a bad way to be introduced. Is it the best way? No, but I think it's still pretty reasonably well done. Ebenezer Scrooge, played by Michael Caine, is the town's most hated man. One of his workers, Bob Cratchit, played by Kermit the Frog, and yes, I know somebody else plays Kermit the Frog, but come on, work with me here, tries to get Christmas Day off to spend with his family. After Scrooge begrudgingly agrees, he's told that he's going to be haunted by 3 ghosts that night. The ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future. Each one shows him exactly that, the past, present, and future, and slowly over the course of the film, Scrooge starts to realize the importance of Christmas, the importance of being nice, and the importance of sharing his wealth with puppets half his size. The film is pretty by the book in following the original story. They have Gonzo and Rizzo as the narrators who constantly get beaten up throughout the entire movie. And all the other Muppet characters play the parts that we know from the book. The one that actually has me pissing my pants with laughter is Fozziwig. By God, I swear this whole movie was put together just so they could do that pun. On the whole, it's a decent film, especially when you look at the sets and the atmosphere and the colors. It's clear the focus of the movie was not to tell a great Muppet film, but rather a decent Christmas Carol. Now the downside is some might find that as a turnoff. As someone who loves the Muppet movie and the Muppet Caper and their early films, I really thought there was going to be a lot more humor to this. Like if you saw the Muppets do a Christmas Carol on, say, The Muppet Show, you know everything would go wrong. Their personalities would get in the way and it'd be all crazy and stuff would be blowing up and falling apart. But here, it's gotta be done more seriously, which isn't a bad thing, I guess. It just doesn't feel that Muppet-ish half the time. But even that's made up for when they do something actually a little different from the story. Stuff that maybe other versions should consider putting in. One of my favorite additions is that the Ghost of Christmas Present has a bad memory. Why? Because he's always living in the present. So sometimes he'll repeat things, like he'll introduce himself twice or say a sentence he already said. That's a really clever idea. I also love the design of the Ghost of Christmas Past. That's kind of a baby, but kind of an adult too, is sort of ageless. But there are definitely some moments that are by no means terrible, but can definitely be a little awkward. While the songs for the most part are pretty damn good, some of them almost sound a little too cleaned up. Like The Love Is Gone is sung almost a little too nice, you almost miss the emotion of it. And let's get to the part that's really gonna make you wanna kill me. I don't think Michael Caine is that great a Scrooge. You heard right, I don't think he's awful, but there are just so many moments where I feel like he's really just phoning it in. For example, what the fuck is this? It just cracks me up how weird it is. There's also some line deliveries that just feel lazy to me. Like look at this scene where he just sort of calls Bob Cratchit's name and it just sounds like really bad acting.
Mr. Scrooge. Bob Cratchit.
Does anyone else feel that was just kinda half-assed? But the biggest scene, and I mean quite literally the biggest scene, is when he's supposed to break down and change his ways. There's no big music, there's no big visuals for it. It all just relies on his performance. And I'm sorry, it doesn't deliver. I don't feel a thing for this guy.
Ebenezer Scrooge. I will live my life in the past, the present, and the future. I will not shut out the lessons the spirits have taught me.
I don't entirely blame him, as the staging and pacing in this scene is kinda weird too. But I think of all the other Scrooges and how I felt so bad for them, and they just made this such a huge scene, and here it's just a guy who looks like he's trying to be sad while saying some lines. But with all that said, I'd say only about half of the performance is not very good. There actually is a half that's pretty decent. And strangely enough, a lot of it's in the musical numbers. Michael Caine is not a very good singer, but he actually does put a lot of passion when he's doing the singing roles. He actually does feel very jubilant when he's singing the final song. And I really love the addition of having him sing a duet with the version of his past love. That's a great idea, and he does it very well. He also has the threatening look and stamina of a proper Scrooge, so I can't say he's terrible, because when he does something good, it is good. But for me, it's only about half the performance. I don't know, it could very well be that I love Christmas Carol so much and I love the character of Scrooge that I really hold them to a high standard. In fact, honestly, I can probably count on my one hand how many great Scrooges I think there really are that I've seen. But still, that's not what you're coming to see. You're coming to see the Muppets. And the Muppets do fine. Even though I don't feel like it's a traditional Muppet movie, I do kind of give it credit that it tried to do something really serious. They still address a lot of the dark stuff. They still kill off Tiny Tim. This could so easily be awkward and laughably done, but it's actually pretty legit. And yeah, like a lot of people, I watch it every year too. It's a strange combo, but a decent one. The kids will enjoy the puppets, the adults will enjoy the jokes, and the Christmas lovers will enjoy Christmas. Have a wonderful holiday and possibly pop this film in. Ever since the movie came out, everyone's been telling me, you gotta see Big Hero 6, you gotta see Big Hero 6. All the critics love it, all the audiences love it, it's been the #1 movie for a couple weeks, it's just incredible, oh my god, fucking Big Hero 6. Naturally, I got pretty excited to see Disney do kind of a superhero film, as when I really thought about it, I don't think we've actually seen one from them. I mean, we've definitely seen heroes in their movies, but not as much comic book characters. I paid my ticket, went on in, and let me tell you, I have never felt an overwhelming sensation that a film was 100% okay. It's honestly hard to think of what else to even say about it. It's okay. How's the fighting? It's okay. How are the characters? They're okay. How are the visuals? They're okay. To be honest, I'm really dumbfounded why so many people are talking about this film. It's not bad, it's not good, it's just okay. It's about the most standard superhero film I've seen in a while. Not that it has nothing new, it's just all the new stuff is okay. The film takes place in the future with a boy named Hero. Hero is a boy genius who has an older brother who's also a boy genius. But Hero is also walking that thin line of applying himself to do great things, or just using it to benefit himself. So his brother introduces him to a team of other super geniuses, and he decides he wants to be a part of it. But to get into the school that they're all in, he has to win this competition. Sure enough, he comes up with an invention that wins everybody's eye, but loses everything in a fire, including his brother. A long time later, he comes across one of his brother's inventions named Baymax. Baymax is kinda like a one-robot hospital. He's designed to help people who are in physical or even mental pain. But sure enough, Hero sees an opportunity to put this machine to good use. When he sees there's a masked villain who's using his invention for evil, it's up to Hero, Baymax, and his newfound team of geniuses to not only find out what's going on, but to do it as, what else? A super team. I'm not gonna lie, literally I predicted who was gonna die, who was gonna be the villain, and even how the movie was gonna end. I wouldn't usually mind as it's more a part of the journey, but this movie seemed really bent on surprising us with its twists as well as its comedy. And both were unbelievably predictable. It was really strange to see all these characters that seemed to be designed well, but I felt like I've seen them in a million other projects. You got the stoner loser, you got the hyper geek, you got the cool one who chews the bubble gum, and most of their dialogue is just centered around the fact that they're making catchphrases that they're gonna repeat later. And when they do, it is so forced. And don't get me wrong, I know a lot of these superhero stories have a lot of that traditional manipulation, saying catchphrases, defeating supervillains, all that good stuff. But superhero films have come a long way recently. Movies like Batman, The Dark Knight, and of course all the incredible Marvel movies that are coming out now, which ironically this is a part of, are light years beyond what this movie's trying to do. The only thing that sticks out about it at all, which I guess is kind of traditional Disney, is the relationship between Hero and Baymax. It's cute, simple, and never seems to go too forced. Baymax seems to keep to his exact programming, yet we still feel something for him. It's not like he breaks it and says he wants to be human or something, he just stays the exact being that he's supposed to be. The best parts of the movie are with him trying to help Hero deal with his loss. When the movie focuses on that element, it's good, but when it tries to actually be a superhero film, it's kind of dull. It's not like there's no imagination put into it, it's just imagination I've seen in a million other places. It's not like I didn't see characters, I just kinda saw characters that were 10 years behind the curve. But like I said, I can't think of anything that was awful. It was just kind of predictable and kind of been done before. Like, a lot. Even San Fran, Tokyo, what an idea combining these two cities together. But I mean, look at it. It's creative, it's not lazy or anything. But doesn't it also kind of look like a million other futuristic cities you've seen before? with a million other characters you've kind of already seen before. Maybe if they kept it more simple, just focusing on the boy and the robot, I would have enjoyed it a lot more. As is, it's just alright. Nothing terrible, nothing spectacular, just alright. But maybe that's not what you'll think. Maybe you'll go and see it as spectacular like the majority of people do. Fair enough, there's nothing really that bad in it. Maybe I'm just not the right person who can see the greatness in it. If you're really curious, check it out for yourself. Okay, so I'm going a little out of order on this one, but at the same time, I couldn't get into the Woods in time to do a Disneycember for it, and yeah, I'll just do it by popular demand in January. But until then, let's do one I actually have gotten a lot of requests to do, The Brave Little Toaster. A film a million times better than it's deserving to be. I mean, just listen to that title. The Brave Little Toaster. This sounds like a story for 1-year-olds that should have little to no effort put into it. And even the setup, in some respects, is kinda like that too. A bunch of appliances, with eyes, mouths, the whole thing, have been sitting around the house waiting for their master to return. But a long amount of time has passed and they're starting to feel like he's never going to come back. Fearing he might be in trouble, they decide to leave the home and go looking for him. The rest of the film is the great big journey they take to try and find where he's gone. Our characters include a radio, played by Jon Lovitz, a vacuum, an electric blanket, a lamp, and of course, our brave little toaster. For a setup that sounds almost insultingly simple, it's really kind of surprising how much effort they put into it. There's a lot of quieter moments in this movie, which when I saw as a little kid, I was really impressed by. It kind of made me feel more adult to watch something that wasn't constantly trying to be loud and singing and obnoxious. It could let softer moments just be softer moments. But with that said, there's definitely a lot of craziness in it too. They come across a lot of neat characters, a lot of wonderful designs, a lot of scary designs, and even a few hummable musical moments. I especially love the Garbage Dump song. It has a really good beat to it, and even years later, I once in a while catch myself humming it.
I took a man to a graveyard. I beg your pardon, it's quite hard enough just living with the stuff I have learned. You're worthless.
One of the fun things about it that you know I would enjoy is that there's a lot of scary scenes in it. Yeah, for something called The Brave Little Toaster, there's a lot of really creepy, intense moments. Look at this climax. This is pretty fucking hardcore for a little kid's film. But even beyond that, the characters are actually kind of enjoyable. They're all really simple, but really unique and distinct. They all kind of come together and help each other out as a group, and they all have their moments to shine. I really appreciate this film not just for being enjoyable, but for taking an idea that pretty much had nothing going for it and just putting their damnedest into it. This is not a lazy project. This is something that people came together and said, you know what, this is weird, this is odd, but we're gonna do everything that we can with it. It's a good film. Okay, not phenomenal, but I don't know what kind of phenomenal things you can really do with this setup. Hell, I'm amazed they even made it to okay standards. This is a fun little adventure to take your kids on. It has enough colorful songs and characters to keep them interested and enough scary moments to get them going, ooh, what's gonna happen next? It's not spectacular, but there's just something to the atmosphere I really like about it. Every action they make you feel the consequences of, and you're totally rooting for them every step of the way. Who the hell would have thought toasters would lead such interesting lives? By popular demand, it's Into the Woods, the famous Stephen Sondheim musical. I actually saw this play in a theater appreciation class once. I remember thinking, wow, this is incredibly clever and really smart, but it's kinda not really my thing. I knew the music was great, and in many respects it was ahead of its time, throwing these twists on fairy tales that now seem to be everywhere, but it's not something I listen to over and over and over. However, I also never thought they would make a movie out of it because, well, it's one of the hardest adaptations you can do. On top of so many characters, there's a bunch of different tones and a lot of uncomfortable adult themes and a lot of dark elements that really wouldn't mix well with a movie-going audience that's looking more for a musical comedy in this kind of setup. Does it pay off? Well, let's look at the story. Or stories, I should say. It's pretty much all the classic fairy tale characters, Little Red Riding Hood, Jack and the Beanstalk, Cinderella, and so forth. Every one of them starts off wishing for something greater than what they have. Cinderella wants to go to the ball, Rapunzel wants to be free, so on and so forth. A good chunk of the focus is on the baker and his wife, who just want to have a child. But a crazy witch, played by Meryl Streep, comes in and lets them know that the reason she can't have a child is because she cursed them, because of a terrible act the baker's father did years ago. In order to relieve the curse, they have to get all sorts of various items that tie into the other fairy tale characters, and in a very short amount of time. Everybody's running around singing songs trying to get their goals done, and when everything seems resolved and fixed, it turns out we're only at the halfway point. Suddenly, all their achieved goals and happily ever afters, it turns out, isn't what they were looking for, or didn't turn out like they expected. Thus, the second half of the movie is actually trying to pick up the problems of the original problems that they had in the first half. Kind of a strange story layout for a movie, huh? Especially one that's based on a 2.5-hour musical. And that is the film's biggest problem. This is obviously meant for a Broadway crowd. With a Broadway audience, you know there's gonna be an intermission. So when you get to the halfway point and it looks like everyone's gonna live happily ever after, it's really funny to hear the narrator say, "End of part 1." With a movie, however, you're thinking it's really going to end and you're gonna go home soon, and then you're sort of disappointed when you find out there's at least 45 minutes left. I remember at that point, a lot of people were checking their watches saying, "Good lord, how long is this movie?" And the irony is, I actually like the second half more than the first half, despite the fact that they cut a lot out. But again, I can see why. It's a movie-going audience, and this is really tough to keep people's attention when it's set up like this. This either needed an intermission or needed to be 2 movies, and honestly, I can't see that happening in this day and age. Not with Into the Woods. While most of the actors are good, including Meryl Streep, who's really yucking it up, she reminds me of Glenn Close from 101 Dalmatians, but still has those softer moments too. The tone is all over the place. Things that the original show had subtle are suddenly made extreme, and things that the show had extreme are suddenly made subtle, and sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, but to be honest, even in the Broadway play, it was kind of hard to get a feel for it. The original show had really goofy stuff, like at some point they feed the narrator to a giant. That's really funny. But then at other points, some main characters die off, and in really tragic ways, and they sing these really sad songs about it. It's like, wait a minute, didn't we just get rid of the narrator a second ago, breaking the fourth wall? How do these two things mix? Back then, that was very new and experimental for Broadway, especially considering the original fairy tales, but in a film, this is really hard to transfer over. In fact, a lot of the comedy is sucked out to replace it with a lot of really heavy adult elements, like abandonment issues, adultery, separation anxiety, mommy and daddy issues, death of a pet, death of a family member, death of a friend, responsibilities of husband and wife. Don't get me wrong, the original musicals sort of had these undertones with the Big Bad Wolf and Little Red Riding Hood, but good God, Johnny Depp in this version? They take those undertones and turn it into holy shit in your face, how could this be mistaken for anything else overtones? Even the song Red Riding Hood sings to the hunter afterwards, I now hear in a totally different way, and it's really uncomfortable. On the one hand, I give them credit that they went full force and just did it, but yeah, this is weird. So hearing all this, you probably think I really don't like the movie, and yeah, on the whole, I don't think it works and didn't quite come together, but at the same time, it is such a tough adaptation. And as someone who did find the show interesting, I don't regret seeing it because I wanted to see how they were going to try and do a lot of this. And some of the choices are very clever. I really like the visuals when you see Red Riding Hood and the grandma in the wolf's stomach. That was really creative. I love the way the atmosphere really captures the characters' emotions in the second half, which is strange because the first half that has all the giants and running around and fantasy stuff is actually played very safe. Not that much grand creativity, it's mostly just done in medium shots. But even then, there's some things that work. Like I remember there's a song where Cinderella's trying to think about what to do and they actually freeze time. That was a cool effect. There's another great shot when Johnny Depp howls like a wolf and we get this cool silhouette. I really wanted more of those, but for the couple that we got, it wasn't that bad. The real star of the movie is the music. I think that is one of the advantages to the film being so straightforward in the way it's shot, is that it allows the music to really excel. You're not really being distracted by all these crazy visuals being thrown at you, you're constantly listening to the nice melodies and the clever lyrics. And like I said, even though the second half has a lot of the songs cut out, they still sound pretty nice. I was really shocked at how well Meryl Streep did with some of the slower songs. I know she doesn't always get the pitch or the notes right, but I don't know, I thought she sold it okay. In between all the other goofy scenes she has, of course. So would I recommend it? Only if you're curious to see how the Broadway show is adapted, because it is neat to check out. If you're curious about the choices they make or what they leave in or take away, it's neat to see as an experiment. But if you're looking for a completed work that masterfully mixes the complex with the simple, this doesn't quite balance out. I'm glad I saw it, but more just to see how they did it. It's by no means awful, and I appreciate a lot of what they tried to do. And I'm happy at the moments when it really did succeed. But it's definitely a mess, and to its credit, I don't know how I would fix it. Do you cut out more? Do you add more? Do you make it more visually interesting? Or do you play it down even more so the music shines? It's all over. I don't know if this musical ever can properly be turned into a good film, but it was a valiant attempt. And sometimes I don't mind checking those out. If you're in the right mood or just a little curious, give it a chance and see their best effort.